When the Pinewood Estates HOA drained the natural water source that had flowed on my family's land for generations claiming flood risk, they had no idea they were unleashing nature's perfect revenge. As their manicured lawns transformed into soggy wetlands and their designer basements filled with the very water they tried to control, I uncovered a web of corruption deeper than anyone imagined. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. My name is James Morgan, and I've lived in Pinewood Estates for 35 years. The house belonged to my grandfather, who built it beside a natural spring that's been flowing here since before any houses existed in this area. My wife Emma, a retired biology teacher, and I raised our 2 children in this home. Though they're now grown and living in different states, we've maintained this property and its beautiful spring as a neighborhood treasure where children come to watch ducks, skip stones, and cool off during hot summers. They can't take your water, Emma shouted, slamming the official HOA notice on our kitchen counter. I picked up the paper with shaking hands, reading the words that would turn our peaceful life upside down. The natural spring that had bubbled on my family's property for over 70 years was now labeled a significant community hazard by Robert Klein, our power-hungry HOA president. He had been eyeing my spring since winning the election 3 months ago, calling it an unsightly water feature during his first neighborhood inspection. That muddy puddle decreases property values by 15%, he'd sneered, not bothering to learn that this puddle provided fresh water for local wildlife and kept our section of the neighborhood naturally cool during scorching summers. The notice gave me 14 days to eliminate the water source or face daily fines of $750. I felt physically ill reading it. This spring wasn't just water, it was my grandfather's legacy. He'd built stone pathways around it, planted weeping willows that now stood 30 feet tall, and taught me to skip stones across its surface when I was just 6 years old. 2 days later, I attended the emergency HOA meeting armed with historical photos of the spring through different seasons and a petition signed by 8 neighbors who appreciated its natural beauty. Robert sat at the head table like a king on his throne, flanked by his loyal board members. Diana, my next-door neighbor who had always borrowed gardening tools and praised my spring's tranquility, now sat beside Robert, avoiding my eyes. "The spring poses significant risk to our community's foundations," Robert announced, holding up an impressive-looking report. "This geological survey confirms potential flooding could cause millions in damage." I stood up, legs trembling but voice steady. "That spring has existed since before these houses were built. There hasn't been a single flood incident in 70 years. Times change. Water tables shift," Robert countered smoothly. "We can't risk our residents' safety for sentiment." "What risk?" I challenged. "The nearest house is 50 yards away with natural drainage between." The room buzzed with whispers. Some neighbors nodded in agreement with me, but others looked worried, whispering about their mortgages and insurance rates. Diana suddenly spoke up. "I've noticed more mosquitoes lately. Standing water breeds disease." She still wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I realized this wasn't about flooding at all. Robert wanted my property value to drop so his developer friends could buy it cheap. I'd overheard him at the summer barbecue talking about maximizing land use potential in our area. "I demand to see this geological survey," I said. "Who conducted it? When did they visit my property?" Robert's smile tightened. "The report is confidential to protect the surveyor from harassment." "That's not how property assessments work," called out Mr. Reeves, a retired civil engineer from down the street. "The homeowner has a right to review any reports about their land." Robert's face reddened. "We're not here to debate procedure. All in favor of the spring removal?" 7 hands shot up, all board members and their close friends. The motion passed. As people filed out, I caught Diana in the parking lot. "Why are you doing this? Your grandchildren love feeding the ducks at my spring." She glanced around nervously. "Robert promised to approve my sunroom addition if I supported him. I need that space for when my daughter visits with the twins." My heart sank. Robert was buying votes with favors. I drove home in a daze, wondering how to fight a system rigged against me. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I heard vehicles outside. Peering through my curtains, I saw 2 trucks parked near my property line. Dark figures moved in the moonlight, carrying equipment toward my spring. I grabbed my phone and flashlight, racing outside in my pajamas. "Hey, this is private property." The men froze. One stepped forward, Jake, the HOA maintenance supervisor. "Just doing some preliminary measurements as authorized by the board." "At 2 a.m. without notifying me?" Robert emerged from the shadows, clipboard in hand. The HOA has 24-hour access rights for safety inspections. It's in your contract. This isn't an inspection. You're planning something. He smiled coldly. We're being proactive about resident safety. Go back to bed. I stood my ground until they left, but I knew they'd return. The next morning I called 3 lawyers. 2 declined after hearing HOA dispute, and the third wanted a $10,000 retainer just to review my case. Desperate, I visited the county records office. Hours of searching revealed something shocking. The geological surveyor Robert hired was his brother-in-law, whose license had been suspended last year for falsifying reports. I also discovered that Pinewood Estates was built on an ancient watershed system. My spring wasn't just decorative, it was a crucial pressure release for underground water flow. Blocking it could cause serious problems for the entire neighborhood. Armed with this information, I requested another HOA meeting. Robert denied it, citing no new evidence. But I had one more card to play. I created a simple website with all my findings, including photos of the spring's history and the truth about the fake geological report. Then I shared it on our neighborhood Facebook group. Within hours, comments poured in. Some residents remembered the spring's history, others questioned the rushed decision. A few board members privately messaged me, admitting they felt pressured to vote yes. Robert responded by sending cease and desist letters claiming defamation. But truth isn't defamation, and I kept posting. Then came the turning point. Mrs. Winters, who had lived in Pinewood Estates for 40 years, posted a comment that changed everything. That spring saved our neighborhood during the 2002 drought when city water restrictions were in place. We all got our gardening water from that spring. It's not just pretty, it's essential. Suddenly people were listening. They shared their own memories, their doubts about Robert's motives. The tide was turning. But Robert wasn't finished. That night, I received an anonymous call. Drop the website or you'll regret it. The voice was disguised, but I recognized the threat in its tone. The sound of heavy machinery jolted me awake at dawn. Industrial pumps lined my property border, their engines roaring as they sucked water from my spring. Robert stood supervising, designer sunglasses hiding his eyes, while Jake directed workers in orange vests. I ran outside, still in my pajamas. Stop. This is illegal. Robert turned, unfazed. Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws. We have authority to address immediate safety hazards. He waved official-looking documents. Judge Wilson signed this emergency order last night. My spring, which had flowed crystal clear for generations, was turning into a muddy pit before my eyes. 70-year-old lily pads shriveled as water levels dropped. A family of mallards waddled confusedly around their disappearing home. I called 911, but the operator said it was a civil matter. I called animal control about the displaced wildlife, but they needed 48 hours' notice. I felt helpless as my family's legacy drained away through industrial hoses. Emma emerged with her phone, recording everything. This is criminal, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Jake stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to stop filming. This is private HOA business. This is MY property, I countered. And that's my spring you're destroying. By noon the spring was gone. A crater of cracked mud remained where water once sparkled. The willow trees already showed signs of stress, their leaves curling. Diana appeared at her fence line that afternoon, planting new roses. Sorry about your water feature, she said without looking up. But property values should improve now. I stared at her in disbelief. You do realize that spring fed the groundwater for this entire area? She shrugged. Robert says the city water system is perfectly adequate. That evening, I met with Carlos, a hydrologist friend from college. He studied my property maps and historical surveys, his face growing increasingly concerned. This is bad, he muttered. Really bad. Your spring wasn't just decorative, it was a pressure release valve for the entire aquifer system. What happens without it? The water has to go somewhere. It'll find the path of least resistance, probably through people's basements. I felt a glimmer of hope. If I could prove the spring's importance, maybe I could force them to restore it. We spent the next week gathering data. Carlos installed monitoring equipment around the neighborhood, measuring soil moisture and groundwater levels. The readings were alarming, pressure was building rapidly. I tried presenting this information at the next HOA meeting, but Robert had changed the rules. Only board members can add agenda items now, he announced smugly. Frustrated, I went public. Local news picked up the story, historic spring destroyed by HOA. Reporters interviewed Mrs. Winters about the 2002 drought. Environmental groups expressed outrage. Robert fought back with his own media campaign. He hired a PR firm to paint me as a disgruntled homeowner spreading misinformation. They released statements about modernizing infrastructure and protecting families. The battle escalated. Robert filed a lawsuit for defamation. I countersued for property damage. Legal bills mounted on both sides. Then the first basement flooded. The Johnsons, who lived 6 houses down, woke up to 4 inches of water in their finished basement. Their insurance called it groundwater intrusion, not covered. 2 days later, the Garcias reported water seeping through their foundation. Then the Parkers. Then Diana. I watched from my window as Diana frantically bailed water from her basement, her prized roses drowning in the oversaturated soil. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I felt sad. This was all preventable. Emergency HOA meetings became weekly events. Residents demanded answers. Robert kept deflecting. These are isolated incidents, he insisted. Old pipes, poor drainage, nothing to do with the spring. But Carlos's data told a different story. The aquifer, without its natural release valve, was forcing water up through any available crack. The entire water table was destabilizing. I shared Carlos's findings on the neighborhood Facebook group. Comments exploded. My sump pump hasn't stopped running in days. There's a spring bubbling up in my backyard now. My foundation guy says this could cost $40,000 to fix. Property values plummeted. 5 houses went up for sale. The local news returned, this time with headlines like, HOA's decision creates neighborhood nightmare. Robert grew desperate. He tried to blame the city, the weather, global warming, anything but his own decision. He even suggested I had sabotaged the neighborhood somehow. But the real bombshell came when Mr. Reeves, the retired civil engineer, did some digging of his own. Follow the money, he told me over coffee. Robert's brother-in-law didn't just do fake surveys. He owned a drainage company. We discovered that Robert had awarded a $1.5 million contract to his brother-in-law's company to manage water issues in Pinewood Estates. The same company that drained my spring was now being paid to fix the problems that drainage caused. I filed a complaint with the state attorney general. Investigators arrived within days. They subpoenaed HOA financial records, interviewed board members, and documented the growing water damage throughout the neighborhood. Robert tried to resign quietly, but residents demanded a public meeting. The school auditorium was packed. Angry homeowners waived repair bills and insurance denials. When Robert took the microphone, boos erupted. He tried to speak about unforeseen circumstances and acting in good faith, but nobody was buying it. Then I played my trump card. Emma had continued recording that morning when they drained my spring. In the background of one video, barely audible, Robert could be heard telling Jake, "Once property values drop, my developer friends will buy up the whole block. We'll all make millions." The auditorium exploded. People shouted for Robert's arrest. Board members resigned on the spot. Diana publicly apologized, admitting Robert had promised her special favors. State investigators took Robert into custody that night. He faced charges of fraud, conspiracy, and misuse of HOA funds. His brother-in-law's company went bankrupt. The developer scheme collapsed. But our problems were just beginning. The neighborhood was still flooding. Insurance companies had declared it a man-made disaster. Homeowners faced financial ruin. In the end, it took a federal disaster declaration to get help. Engineers worked for months to restore the natural water flow. My spring was rebuilt, but it would take years to fully recover. The cost? Over $8 million. Most came from Robert's seized assets and the HOA's insurance. He got 12 years in prison. Diana now leads a reformed HOA focused on environmental preservation. She tends a memorial garden where my spring flows again, teaching children about the importance of working with nature, not against it. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes, it's simply letting nature take its course. Water always finds its way. And so does justice. The knock at my door startled me awake. I blinked at my phone, 3:17 a.m. Who visits at this hour? Through the peephole I saw Diana drenched and frantic. "The water's everywhere," she panted as I opened the door. "My basement's completely flooded, 6 inches deep." I grabbed my jacket. Something wasn't right. Diana's house sat uphill from mine. Water shouldn't flow that direction. Unless. The next morning, I spent hours at the county records office, my fingers blackened from dusty file folders. The clerk raised an eyebrow as I requested more maps, but I needed answers. That's when I found it, a 1965 geological survey showing Pinewood Estates sat on top of natural underground water channels. My spring wasn't just decoration, it was part of a complex system that kept water pressure stable for the entire neighborhood. By capping it, Robert had turned our community into a pressure cooker ready to burst. At home I called Carlos. "You're sitting on a water bomb," he confirmed after reviewing my findings. "That spring acted like a safety valve. Block it and the water finds other ways out, usually through foundations." I needed more proof. Using borrowed ground-penetrating radar, I mapped water movement under our streets. The readings were terrifying. Water pressure had doubled in just 2 weeks. At this rate, half the neighborhood would be underwater by spring. The next HOA meeting was packed. Residents complained about damp basements and cracking foundations. Robert sat at the head table, perfectly composed in his designer suit. "These are isolated incidents," he insisted, shuffling papers. "Our drainage expert assured us." "Your expert never even visited the site." I stood up, holding the geological survey. "This proves our spring was essential for water management." Diana jumped to her feet. "Robert has increased our property values by 15%. Why should we trust you over our successful board president?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I realized Robert had bought their loyalty with false promises. "Ask yourselves why he rushed this project," I pressed on. "Why hire consultants who never inspect the property? Why ignore decades of natural balance?" Robert's smile tightened. "Motion to adjourn this." "Wait." Mr. Johnson interrupted. "My insurance adjuster says the flooding is from disrupted groundwater. They won't cover the damage." The room erupted in worried chatter. Robert banged his gavel repeatedly, but order wouldn't return. I met Carlos outside afterward. "There's something else," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "I traced the drainage contractor. It's owned by Robert's brother-in-law. He's getting kickbacks." "Can you prove it?" "Working on it. But be careful, he's got powerful friends." That evening, I installed security cameras around my property. If Robert was corrupt, he might try anything to silence me. Sure enough, at midnight, I caught footage of someone tampering with my water meter. The figure wore a hood, but I recognized Jake, the HOA maintenance supervisor. He was trying to frame me for the flooding. I backed up the video to 3 separate drives. This was bigger than I'd imagined. The following week, more basements flooded. The community pool cracked from underground pressure. Even Robert's allies began questioning his decisions. I spent nights researching water rights law, discovering the HOA had violated multiple state regulations. They'd needed permits for major drainage changes, permits they never obtained. At the library, I found newspaper articles about Robert's previous HOA. He'd resigned suddenly after financial irregularities. The pattern was clear, but I needed solid evidence. Then Diana appeared at my door, mascara running down her cheeks. "My roses are dying," she sobbed. "The yard's completely waterlogged. Robert promised this would never happen." "Did he promise you anything else?" I asked gently. Diana hesitated, then nodded. "A board position. Extra votes on landscaping committees." But now, she gestured helplessly at her ruined garden. I showed her my research. Her eyes widened with each document. "He's been playing us all," Diana whispered. "Will you help me expose this?" She straightened her shoulders. "Yes. I have emails." She offered evidence of Robert promising several residents special treatment for support. Together we built our case. More neighbors came forward with stories of bribes and threats. Robert had created a network of corruption, all to line his pockets. The state finally took notice when I filed a formal complaint with the Department of Environmental Protection. Investigators arrived, taking water samples and interviewing residents. Robert tried damage control, hosting wine and cheese gatherings where he spun tales of necessary improvements. But fewer people attended each time. Late one night, reviewing financial records Diana had smuggled from board meetings, I found the smoking gun. Payments to the drainage company matched exactly with unexplained deposits in Robert's personal account. I had him cornered. But Robert wasn't finished. The next morning, I found a cease and desist letter in my mailbox, threatening legal action for defamation. He declared war. I was ready. Water exploded through Robert's kitchen floor during the emergency board meeting. The irony was perfect. He'd been mid-sentence denying any connection between the spring drainage and neighborhood flooding when his designer tiles buckled upward. "Everyone out!" I shouted as water sprayed toward the ceiling. Board members scrambled for the exits, expensive shoes ruined in the sudden indoor lake. Robert stood frozen, watching his granite countertops crack from the pressure. "This is impossible," he kept repeating. But I knew better. The underground aquifer had finally found its breaking point, right beneath the person responsible for disturbing it. Outside, residents gathered in shocked clusters. Diana clutched her rescued meeting notes, now water-stained evidence. News vans arrived within minutes. Someone had tipped off Channel 7. "Is it true the HOA president's house just flooded?" A reporter thrust a microphone toward me. Before I could answer, Robert burst out, hair disheveled, pointing accusingly. "This is sabotage. He did this." The camera swung between us. I remained calm. "I've been warning about this for weeks. Nature doesn't follow HOA rules." That's when Mr. Reeves stepped forward. He'd been quiet throughout the controversy, but now his hands shook as he produced a folder. "I can't stay silent anymore," he announced. "These are the real financial records. Robert's been skimming HOA funds." The crowd gasped. Robert lunged for the documents, but Mr. Reeves held firm. Camera flashes lit up the scene like lightning. "Show us page 7, I urged, remembering the suspicious payments I'd discovered. Mr. Reeves flipped to the page, revealing transfers to KR Consulting, Robert's shell company. The drainage contractor payments matched perfectly. "This is a setup," Robert shrieked. The water continued gushing from his house, a natural metaphor for his crumbling empire. State investigators arrived by afternoon. They'd received my complaint but hadn't acted until the public flooding incident. Now they swarmed the neighborhood, collecting evidence. I guided them to key locations, showing how the drainage system violated environmental codes. They took soil samples, measured water tables, and interviewed residents. Diana became our star witness. "He promised me preferential treatment," she told investigators, "said my property value would double if I supported the spring removal." More neighbors came forward. Robert had offered everyone something: reduced fees, committee positions, expedited approvals. His corruption ran deep. The insurance companies sent their own investigators. With documented HOA negligence, they denied all flooding claims. Residents faced financial ruin. "We trusted him," Mr. Johnson said, surveying his destroyed basement. "Now we're losing everything." I organized a community meeting at the local school gym, neutral territory. Residents needed answers and solutions. "We can fix this," I explained, presenting restoration plans. "But first we need to remove corrupt leadership and recover stolen funds." That night, security cameras caught Robert loading boxes into his car. I called the sheriff immediately. They intercepted him at the county line with HOA laptops and shredded documents. His arrest made headlines: HOA president caught fleeing after flood scandal. The mugshot showed his designer outfit mud-splattered, hair wild, a far cry from his polished image. During interrogation he cracked. The full scope emerged: years of embezzlement across multiple HOAs. He targeted communities with valuable natural features, destroying them for profit. The trial moved quickly. I testified about discovering the geological surveys, the illegal drainage, the tampered water meter. Diana described the bribery attempts. Mr. Reeves explained the financial fraud. Robert's defense claimed he'd acted for community benefit, but prosecutor Maria Chen systematically destroyed each argument. The security footage of him counting cash with contractors sealed his fate. "Guilty on all counts," the judge declared. Robert received 12 years for fraud, environmental violations, and conspiracy. His assets were seized to fund neighborhood restoration. But legal victory couldn't immediately fix flooded homes. Engineers worked overtime designing systems to restore natural water flow. The spring needed careful reopening to prevent further damage. Insurance battles continued. Some residents sold their ruined properties at huge losses. Others formed a class action lawsuit against Robert and his associates. Throughout it all, I documented everything. Local universities requested my research for case studies on environmental justice. The story went viral: David versus HOA Goliath. Diana surprised everyone by volunteering to lead the interim HOA board. "I helped create this mess," she admitted. "I want to help fix it." Together, we established new bylaws requiring environmental impact studies and transparent finances. No more backroom deals or rushed projects. Contractors worked through winter installing proper drainage while preparing to restore the spring. The aquifer needed time to rebalance after months of disruption. By spring, cautious optimism spread through Pinewood Estates. Properties dried out. Foundations were repaired. And the community learned valuable lessons about blind trust. As water began flowing again from my restored spring, children gathered to watch. Their wonder reminded me why this fight mattered: preserving natural beauty for future generations. Robert's empire had crumbled like his waterlogged mansion. But from that destruction our community emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. As I sit by my spring today watching its clear waters flow again, I realize that nature always finds balance. You can divert it, dam it, or drain it, but water, like truth, always finds a way to break through. The wetlands that temporarily transformed our manicured neighborhood taught us all a powerful lesson: work with nature, not against it. And never, ever mess with a natural water source just to increase property values.